Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. All right, man. You know what? So I do have the much anticipated Armageddon game between Wesley So and former world champion Viswanathan Anand. This is a crazy game, man. It really was. It was a pretty big roller coaster filled with blunders. But you know, that's how the Armageddon game should go. It should have a bunch of blunders in it. That is the whole point of them making it faster. But yes, so for all of my people that are coming from the Philippines, I will say mabuhay to you. Kamusta na aking mga kaibigan. I appreciate you guys very much for stopping by and watching my stuff. My YouTube has been doing a lot better these past 3, 4, 5 days. So I'm just trying to keep the momentum. You see, I'm like working crazy overtime right now, trying to get videos out, clips and such. Let me know what you guys think about those thumbnails that I make, because I just literally have like this little thumbnail creator that I kind of put on there. So that pretty much, I can kind of toss a whole bunch of stuff in there. So I try to make them look as like exciting and interesting as possible or whatever. So feel free to comment on those videos and let me know, you know, if the thumbnails are pretty cool. But anyways, for anybody who is coming from India, I will say Vanakkam to you. Nandri for coming by and taking a look at my video. I really appreciate it. But if you guys are ready to go, let's take a look and see what we have for this game. So we got C4. Let me get the volume up, because you guys know I always forget. We got C5, knight to C3, and knight to C6. And basically, Anand is just copying Wesley So. No, I'm playing. They're playing just the most solid way you can play. We do have G3. We got G6. Bishop to G2, bishop to G7. We will break the symmetry at some point. We do see E3, E6, and then we finally have a move that strays away from what we had from Wesley So. So we do have E4, and Wesley is trying to set up like a Moroxy bind type situation, which unfortunately does make the D4 square pretty weak, but you know, black has their own kind of weakness on D6, so you know, it's not too bad. We do see knight G to E7. We have pop this up a touch. Okay. We do have knight G to E2. We got castles, B6, A3. We got D6. Rook slides over to B1. We see knight down to D4. Like I said, there is a really gigantic hole on D4. So you're going to rearrange the knights so that they do take advantage of that. We have B4. Knight E comes to C6. We see bishop to E3. We got bishop to D7. Queen goes to D2, and then we do see the novelty of the game, which is knight takes E2 with check. Of course, you only have one way to capture back. You can't capture with the queen, because then this knight is going to be like, what about me? Like, you're not caring about me, and it's just going to drop off the board. So knight takes E2, and we do see knight back down to D4. Like I said, I mean, you are playing very seriously on this D4 square with the structure being closed. The knight is the perfect piece to put on that D4 square. Wesley So says, man, it's annoying. I don't like it. Let me get rid of it. So knight takes D4, pawn takes D4, and then we do have bishop to H6. And I mean, both sides are just really, really solid. It shows that, I mean, white has maybe just a touch more of, you know, like an advantage, but I mean, it's not like you're just going to win the game with that. And so bishop goes to H6. It is kind of pinned to this rook, so you're trying to kind of get rid of it. But we do see E5, bishop takes G7, king takes G7, and then we do have F4. You really kind of have to strike somewhere. There isn't a whole lot that you can really do on this side. I mean, rook F to C1 is going to be met with like F6. The queen can even come down and stuff like that. Or you can even close the position up for the most part. Whatever you feel like doing. So we do see F4, and then F6 does come. And basically, you know, Anand is just trying to make sure that whatever Wesley So plays, he just stays as solid as possible against it. So we do have H4. We got B5. A rook B to C1. We got pawn takes C4, rook takes C4. And then we do have a little bit of an annoying situation occurring. For any of you guys that play with, you know, have played rooks against bishops, you will know what I'm talking about. We got bishop to B5, you know, tickling the rook, and the rook is pretty ticklish. So rook goes to C2, bishop goes to A4. So you're just like, dude, are you going to let me like put my rook anywhere? Like, what's going on? So we do see a rook to C8. And then we do have the move H5. I mean, this isn't the soundest move at all. But I mean, it is a blitz game, so anytime you could try to force your opponent into having to try to think and calculate in a blitz game, you're doing a good job of like making them kind of burn some time. So, that's that's pretty much what Wesley So is trying to work on in this position. So the pawn does take h5. We see bishop to f3. We're just trying to get our pawn back, basically. So we do see queen to d7. We see queen over to h2. So we have a rook takes c1, a rook takes c1, and the rook goes to c8. And basically, as you guys can see, I mean, black is doing really, really well in this position. Viswanathan Anand is finding like all the correct ways to play this position. They're all really super logical moves. I mean, white has the c file, so you're just trying to, counteract that. Just contest the file. So it's all pretty principled play. But, like I said, Anand is doing a very good job of defending against what Wesley So is doing. So we see rook over to f1. This is a very logical move because this rook is kind of like, hemming in this king if we can ever get like any types of trades going on and get this file open. This queen is kind of over here. So, if black doesn't do what they're supposed to do, white has a really promising position. But we do see rook down to c3, and immediately like Anand basically like switches Wesley So's focus over to defending now. And so that's pretty much what Wesley So is having to do. We do see bishop back to e2. We got bishop up to b5. We got queen taking h5 because they're like, hey, I'm going to go ahead and take this. I'm going to go ahead and take this pawn. But it does give away this d3 pawn. So we do see bishop taking d3. And then we actually have, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on what exactly occurs, a blunder by Wesley So. He actually captures on e5. You see the bar go crazy. Like I said, this is a like literally game-losing blunder. So if you want to go ahead and pause the video and guess what move black should play in this position, go ahead and do so. Okay, like I said, this was a complete game-losing blunder. I'll show you like the most logical variation as to why that is. But what we actually saw in the game was pawn takes e5. And so Anand made his own blunder in the position. I'm not 100% sure what his time was. I think they were actually both pretty good on time. But I just think that he missed this tactic that Wesley had in this position. But backing up, it was most, accurate to actually, instead of taking the pawn, to take bishop taking e2. What you're doing with this move is you're attacking the undefended queen on h5. And number two, you are removing an attacker for the position, because if you rewind it, white has like this pawn that's an attacker, this rook, this bishop can kind of swing in and stuff like that. So black is in a really bad situation. So, one of the main things, like I said, is to try to remove an attacker of your position. So that's what you should be looking for in your own games. If you're getting relentlessly attacked by some, your opponent's pieces, if you have the ability to try to get rid of like, a few of those pieces to try to ease your position, definitely go ahead and do that. So this was a really nice in-between move. And if Anand would have found this move, it might would have gone something like so. The bishop would take on e2, and this is very unfortunate for white. It basically forces two moves. Either the queen takes on e2, which is like making things worse, or to take on f6 with check, which would be the most logical thing to do if you're going to go down, like I said, go down swinging. So the pawn would take on f6 with check, and the king would actually very safely step back to h8. We would see not really caring about your queen, because, of course, if the bishop were to take here, you would be going, pawn goes to f8, queens, and that would be checkmate, because, you can't really go anywhere with the king. So the first important move to put is rook takes g3 with check. And then after the king literally goes anywhere, bishop takes f5. And then now, once you do see this queening of the pawn, you have a rook to g8, which covers. If the queen tries to step down, I mean, you have queen covering. And so you're literally just up an entire piece as black. So this was definitely something that would have made things very miserable for Wesley So, but this was not found by Anand. And like I said, he did go pawn takes e5, which actually allows Wesley So to put a really nice attack in motion. After the pawn takes e5, we did see queen down to f3. And as you guys can see, Anand is losing an entire piece. He is also threatening check, which forces the king up here. And we're looking at checkmate. So, of course, if you're thinking, okay, well, I'm just going to defend like this or something or whatever. All right, this is just completely mating because, like I said, you have this. So this is just, I mean, you're threatening the piece and mate. Anytime you can ever threaten checkmate and the piece, you're going to win the piece. I mean, nobody's going to just get check. I mean, well, somebody might get checkmated, but, you know, you're not going to try to do that. So in this position, Anand doesn't really have too much that he can really do. So he goes queen to e6, but that, like I said, just drops the piece. And everything, you know, from this point on is pretty straightforward. The rook takes on a3. We see king up to g2. So, you know, Wesley So has won the piece. So his main thing that he's trying to focus on is just making sure that he plays very solidly, making sure that, you know, he doesn't do anything foolish to like basically, you know, give the piece back or make his position go, you know, get worse than it is right now. So we do see a6. We see rook up to f2, just trying to keep everything as solid and defended as possible. So the rook goes to b3, and we have a really nice move, bishop to c4. Rook takes f3, bishop takes e6, and we don't want to trade on f2 because we're just basically giving all our pieces away. So the rook goes back over to e3. We see bishop down to f5 in perfect time to defend that pawn. We see rook over to b3, and we're giving a counterattack with rook to a2. Rook takes b4, rook takes a6. We see rook up to b7. We see rook up to d6. Rook goes to a7. We see king over to h3, just getting a little bit of safety with the king. The rook sidesteps over to b7. As you can see, you know, Anand has gotten into a position where all he can really do is kind of shift back and forth. He doesn't really have a whole lot that he can really try for. This pawn is literally not going anywhere. And the very, very important thing is if you do have the ability to get this pawn rolling at all, bishop to g4 is covering that queening square, so you doubly don't really have anything you can do with that pawn. So the king goes up to g4. We see the rook back over to a7. King goes to h5. We see rook over to c7, rook up to d8. And as you can see, this king is getting close, and this bishop is starting to put, you know, black in a checkmating net. So the rook comes over to e7 to defend against bishop to e6. We see bishop down to g4. I mean, it is in this position that Viswanathan Anand does resign the game. Like I said, you know, black is going to get into a position where like he's in the Zugzwang. Like he's not going to really be able to make any type of move that isn't going to hurt his position. So he just basically says, I'm going to go ahead and just give up. You know, and I'll just show you like a very simple variation that really just, it's not the best variation, but it just visually represents like just simplifying the game into just kind of like a completely one game. So if the king steps over to f7, we would just, you know, possibly see rook to d7. Like I said, just trying to simplify the position and make sure there aren't any complications. So you're either going to wait until white captures the rook on e7 or just take it yourself. So the rook takes on d7, bishop takes d7, the king sidesteps back over, and then you have bishop back to b5. And like I said, you are not pushing this pawn. And at some point, black is going to have to give in their position. The king would go back over to f7, king up to h6, king up to g8, bishop to c4 with check. The king steps into the corner. You got g4, which basically, like I said, puts, you know, black in a Zugzwang. There isn't a whole lot of moves that you can make in this position. There's literally f5 or d3. Both of them just completely lose. You know, you do that, and then, I mean, you just lose the pawn. And you either push this pawn now or you move the king over. I mean, that's just all she wrote. It is a very, very miserable position for black to be in. So it's crazy how right before Anand blundered, he literally had the ability to just completely just like win the game with bishop takes e2. So it's really crazy. And that was even more crushing than queen back to f3 for Wesley. So like it was like +6 like for black. So it was just like an insane, you know, like complete win. So it would have, man, it's crazy that he missed that. But I mean, that's what Armageddon is supposed to do. You know, you're supposed to kind of get into blunders and overlook things and stuff. It's kind of like when you play Bullet Online. I mean, sometimes if you looked at my games online, it would look like I didn't even like my pieces at all. Like the way I throw pieces away, I'm just like, Kobe's. Anyways, I appreciate you guys very much for coming by. Mermin salamat aking makaibigan. Hangdong Samuli. Yes, Hungong Samuli, Nandri, if you're coming from India. And I appreciate you guys, and I will see you guys next time.